The U.S. and other countries prepare to evacuate their citizens after days of clashes in South Sudan kill hundreds. Hunger prompts South Sudanese to seek refuge in Kenya. First, there were safety issues. Now, it's possible security problems with Pokemon Go. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Now, the U.S. military has deployed about 40 soldiers to South Sudan's capital following days of clashes that left hundreds dead and raised fears of renewed civil war. The military's Africa Command says the troops were sent to Juba to safeguard the U.S. Embassy and help carry out a State Department order for non-essential personnel to leave the country. Other countries, including Germany and India, are taking steps to evacuate personnel as a tenuous ceasefire declared by South Sudan's rival leaders on Monday continues to hold. Violence in the five-year-old nation resumed last Thursday after forces affiliated with President Salva Kiir and First Vice President Riek Machar engaged in a deadly clash at a checkpoint in the capital. Hav Ladzus, the head of United Nations peacekeeping operations, urged the Security Council Wednesday to take concerted action and consider imposing an arms embargo on South Sudan.
Clearly, the threat of that has done little to deter the parties, but I think it has to be as clear as possible. Likewise, additional targeted sanctions on leaders and commanders that block the implementation of the peace agreement must be enacted immediately. The never-ending cycle of violence, of devastating violence, of South Sudan must come to an end now.
Well, Ladzus told the Security Council that 36,000 people have been displaced by the fighting and the 7,000 have taken refuge on local UN bases. Fighting between supporters of the two men has killed tens of thousands and displaced more than 2 million people since 2013. Now, under heavy international pressure, the rival leaders signed a peace deal last August. Andrew Burnett, acting director in the Office of the U.S. Special Envoy to South Sudan and Sudan, told VOA that the U.S. will work with the partners to ensure the peace deal is implemented to the letter. Now, after the outbreak of violence in South Sudan's capital, Juba, in the past week, East African bloc IGAD demanded the creation of an intervention brigade similar to a UN combat force in Democratic Republic of Congo that is mandated to enforce peace by targeting and neutralizing armed rebel groups. Casey Copeland of the International Crisis Group in Juba says it will take more than a military force.
Under certain conditions, and we saw even the region, the Horn of Africa regional peacemakers, they advocated an intervention force at one point. Given certain parameters, I think we see that different forms of intervention will be necessary, but any form of intervention must be part of a political process. It must have a political objective. Interventions, sanctions, arms embargoes, they don't achieve anything on their own. So what we need is a real political strategy, and that's the next step.
Now, for more on the situation in South Sudan, I'm joined by Ambassador Gordon Buay, who's responsible for Consular and South Sudan affairs in North America. Ambassador Buay, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
Now, how would you describe the situation now in South Sudan?
The situation is calm. The fighting which happened last Friday has been arrested, and there's no more fighting starting from Tuesday. Now the shops are open, people are going about with their lives.
But there's still concern. People are fearing that things could easily flare up. The tensions remain. What are you doing? What is the government, let's say the government of national unity doing to ensure that doesn't happen?
The government of national unity at the Council of Ministers meeting on Tuesday, which was attended by all ministers, including the SPLMIO ministers. The only person who did not attend was Dr. Riek Machar, but he already is in contact with President Salva Kiir. So let me tell you, what happened is not a big-scale fighting. It was only a faction within the SPLAIO that started shooting at the palace while Dr. Riek Machar and Salva Kiir were in the meeting. This faction did not support the peace from the beginning since last year. They believe in Nur prophet called Mundeng. So they believe, according to the prophecies of Nur prophet Mundeng, that when they come to Juba, then they will start fighting at J1 at the palace, and then they will kill the president.
The information we got from there is that there was a confusion here. There was some information that Dr. Riek Machar had been detained, and they wanted to see him. They wanted to make sure he's safe, but they were not allowed inside, or they were not allowed to see him, and therefore they started shooting. And that is when this escalated into a fight.
No, Dr. Riek Machar, because there is a protocol when the VIPs are in the meeting, Dr. Riek Machar was inside with 6 security bodyguards.
Yes.
The rest with arms were outside. So the factions within his group that do not want peace circulated information to his forces that were outside, to the lieutenant colonel called David Rio Maguet, telling him that, oh, Dr. Riek is being detained.
Yes.
So the reason was that they wanted to create a problem. So David Rio went to the guard and said that he wanted to get inside the meeting. He was stopped. He was told, no, you just wait for your leader to finish. He said, no, I got information that Dr. Riek Machar was detained. He was told, no, Dr. Riek Machar is not detained. If he's detained, why don't you call your generals, your superiors? And then he started shooting, and he shot one of the guards. This is how the fighting happened.
Okay,
yes.
so
but it was a planned plot by the faction of Mundeng faction within the SPLA-IO, yes.
But this had nothing to do with
Dr.
Machar
it has nothing to do
himself.
with Dr. Riek Machar.
Dr. Riek Machar.
Yes.
Now, of course, recently we spoke with Dr. Majak Agut, and they said that one of the things that you notice or you get a sense of in Juba is that the two men don't seem to have full control of their people, of their forces, and it might be wise that they're out of the picture. In fact, so that you have a more neutral government in Juba. That might be a solution.
That is not true. The only person who is not in control is Dr. Riek Machar. The government has been in control since 2013. And the president is controlling his forces.
Yeah, but we know that...
I'm coming to what Dr. Majak said.
Yeah.
Dr. Majak is coming from his own political perspective, because he is from a group that has been advocating for Riek Machar and Salva Kiir to be removed. Dr. Majak, when he was a deputy minister of defense for 3 years, he did not transform the SPLA army. He was even responsible for destroying the army, because he created a small group of 2 of his own section followers and building a sectarian group within the SPLA to fulfill his ambition for leadership.
Yeah. But at this point, you know, most people looking from outside, what they feel is that the conditions in Juba create for an explosive atmosphere where any of these men can easily say something or do something that will create another civil war.
No, not a condition in Juba.
Yes.
Dr. Riek has nothing, as a person, has nothing to do with this. He even said it on Friday after the incident when he had a conference with the president. The problem is that the international community did not understand the internal SPLM-IO politics. The internal SPLA-IO politics is that there is a faction that is following Nur prophet called Mundeng, and that faction is not for peace. So when we told even our friends, the American and the rest of the Western countries, that, look, you need to understand the internal Nur politics, the Nur dynamics, in order to bring peace. Dr. Riek Machar and those of Taban Dengai who are still in Juba, they advocate for peace. But this faction, led by Chief of Staff of the SPLA-IO, believe that the only solution is to remove President Kiir from power through violence. So the problem is not Dr. Riek Machar. The problem is this faction that he could not control, because you remember when the fighting happened in 2013, Dr. Riek Machar was just bringing the loose groups, the White Army, different groups. So he was not having control. He was just a political leader without a military
but he has
hierarchical
control. One of the things I noticed is that there has been a lot of, kind of exchanges between, say, people who are on the President Kiir's side and those who are Dr. Machar's side that can lead to, situations that can cause war. I mean, I have to say this. I was looking at your Facebook, for example, and some of the things you've posted, I have to say, perhaps, if you ask me, are some of the most undiplomatic things I've ever read from a person who is a diplomat. I mean, I could quote here, for example, you write that you're going to attack the political opponents politically and finish them. You say, I don't believe in wounding the opponent.
That was during the war, right?
I believe in...
Before the peace was signed.
They say, I believe in finishing the opponent once and for all.
But that was before the peace was signed, right? That was.
But some of your postings were actually from yesterday. These are things that you said after this fighting in Juba.
I was responding to the Riek Machar press secretary, who talked to Lieutenant Colonel who started the shooting. I think you got that, right?
Yeah.
The Riek Machar secretary, who is in Nairobi, talked to the Riek Machar, to Lieutenant Colonel David Rio, and told him that Riek Machar was detained. So it was basically the one who exploit the situation by helping the anti-peace element group within SPLIO. So I was responding to him because he was using social media to destroy the peace. I think you got what he wrote.
But as a diplomat, for example, you said, Dr. Riek Machar, after you said you found his book, there's a book that was found in his book, and you said,
that is correct.
This man is really a troublemaker. Now, you are supposed to be representing the government of national unity. If you write stuff like this about the other partner in the government, does that not incite people into
No, it doesn't
hate?
incite people. There is, as I told you, there is a faction within the SPLA-IO which is not for peace. And I can even show you there are some videos that you would see is people are inciting in North America calling for ethnic war. I think you saw them. So now with that book Dr. Riek has been reading, so in your perspective when you look at it, as is the book, I think you got the title of the book. So the title of the book by itself, if it is read by him, including these generals who are not for peace, so what would be your expectation? That was the issue.
Yeah, but as a person who is supposed to help actually promote peace, you're supposed to be representing people from all sides. You do make a lot of references to ethnic groups, the Nuers and others. And for example, in one place you say, we're a government and we cannot be intimidated by anybody. If you want peace, we give you peace. But if you want war, we will give you war.
I'm referring to the group that is the Mundeng faction. That is against the peace. I think you know that I'm a Nuer. I'm not Dinka. I think you know that, right?
I know.
So now this group, because this is why we're saying the international community needs to understand the dynamic of Nuer politics. This group, the Mundeng factions, who believe that the only option for them is war. How do you address them? Because if you are dealing with ISIS, well, like what the United States is doing, they are fighting ISIS, right? They are not negotiating with ISIS. But if the Taliban put down their weapon and they believe in peace, and then you negotiate with them. But as a government, if somebody is for war, you have to protect the people. You have to confront them.
At this stage, are you guys promoting peace, or some of you might actually be promoting war? Or
no, which guy is promoting war?
Let's say
we are the government. So as the government, we are protecting the constitution and the peace, so that there is law and order. If somebody is outside the constitution, trying to attack the government, fighting the system, that is the person who is wrong. For instance, the ISIS fighting the U.S., they are the one that is wrong, right?
But
so
this
is the logic of the state.
This is a government of national unity. So you're supposed to be speaking in one voice.
It's the government of national unity, but we have not yet integrated a force within IO that is against the peace. Because Riek Machar himself is not in control of the White Army. So how do you address the issue of the White Army? Because they are fighting the government, and these people who believe in Mundeng are fighting the government, and Riek cannot control them. As a government, what do? Do we allow them to kill the people? No. We have to confront them.
Anyway, this is a conversation that will continue. We hope to see peace in South Sudan. Ambassador Gordon, thank you very much.
Thank you, no problem.
Yes, for coming over. Now, Ambassador Gordon Buay is responsible for consular and South Sudan affairs in North America. Now, police officers shot and killed at least 4 fellow Kenyan policemen at their station on Thursday. Police say he was later killed by an elite squad which specializes in hostage situations after holding other prisoners hostage as police surrounded Kapenguria police station in western Kenya. Kenya's police chief Joseph Boynet said all the inmates in the police cell at the station was safe, while one officer of the special squad was wounded. Now, the United Nations World Food Programme says 1 in 4 people in sub-Saharan Africa is undernourished. Among the causes of food shortages is food waste. Many farmers lack the means to safely store crops or quickly set them to get them to the markets. Lenny Rovaga reports from Makueni, Kenya, where farmers are exploring new ways to preserve their harvests.
John Musomba has been growing mangoes for a decade. His 300 trees now produce up to 10 metric tons of the fruit every harvest. It's a great yield if he can get it sold in time. The town of Makueni lies in a semi-arid region. The scorching heat causes produce to rot quickly once it's peaked. But the United States-based Rockefeller Foundation partnered with farmers here to buy this 30,000 solar-powered cooler.
With the technology, now everybody from Nairobi, nearly all over Kenya, he knows there is a facility here. And if he comes, he knows he'll waste very little time, because it's a question of opening the cold room. He needs 3,000 kgs. He gets there, the produce he goes.
The initiative is called YieldWise, and it also includes free training on food preservation. Today, Musomba and fellow farmers are going through a session on drying fruit. Burton and Bumba, a local agro-processing company, packages the dried mangoes and strawberries for sale.
But what we want to do is really help support and develop an industry in East Africa around dehydration. And I think many people will benefit, not only the farmer, who will be given a fair price for his product, but it's an employment creator. And it puts Africa on the map as a credible international supplier of great quality dried fruit.
According to the United Nations World Food Programme, farmers in sub-Saharan Africa lose up to 30% of their crop to waste.
To reduce food loss and food waste, you need probably two critical things. One is around storage. How are you storing properly the grains, the staple crops, and the fruits and vegetables that are produced? And then you also need technology for processing to transform that product that's a perishable into something else so that it doesn't spoil along the way.
The initiative hopes to expand this training to as many as 5,000 farmers in Kenya. Lenny Ruvaga for VOA News, Makueni.
President Barack Obama says the United States can expect to see more tensions between police and communities next month, next year, for quite some time.
I didn't hear anybody around this table suggest that this problem is going to be solved overnight. Because the roots of the problems we saw this week date back not just decades, date back centuries. There are cultural issues, and there are issues of race in this country, and poverty, and a whole range of problems that will not be solved overnight.
Obama held a 4-hour conversation at the White House late Wednesday with police chiefs, several governors and mayors, and members of the Black Lives Matter movement, created to pressure political leaders to take action on police brutality and criminal justice reform.
I will also say that this is probably the most candid conversation that I've heard police chiefs, rank and file members, and union members talk about the need for change, but also talk about some of the challenges that they have.
Wednesday's meeting came after last week's sniper death of 5 white policemen in Dallas, Texas, by a black Army veteran, angered over the earlier shooting deaths of young black men by officers in Minnesota and Louisiana. The president said police departments feel embattled and unjustly accused of targeting young black men, while minority communities feel it is taking too long for those in charge to do what is right. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCoy. Coming up, how renewed fighting in South Sudan is threatening the well-being of those already displaced. Stay with us.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They tell you what people are talking about. So for an in-depth look at the stories trending high on social media, turn to #VOA. It's not your typical talk show. From politics to pop culture, #VOA brings in the people leading the conversation, engages the audience, and gets answers to your questions. #VOA. Smart talk for smart people.
Well, renewed fighting in South Sudan is raising concern for the well-being of millions of those already displaced.
Here in Kenya's Kakuma camp, hundreds of thousands of South Sudanese are seeking refuge after escaping conflict and hunger at home. The UN refugee agency UNHCR says currently at least 100 people arrive in the Kakuma camp every week. The arrivals have stretched the camp to its limits. Cecilia Obere and her 3 children traveled from eastern Equatoria province to find safety and food here. Her daughter, Carlita, is sick with anemia and pneumonia as a result of severe malnutrition.
There is a serious drought in South Sudan. There is no rain and there is a lot of hunger. We also have a lot of insecurity. I had to leave my home as my husband died and nobody was helping me.
UNHCR says malnutrition affects about 19% of all South Sudanese refugee children arriving in Kakuma. Out of 543 children below the age of 5 screened by medical staff in May, 103 were severely malnourished and 126 were moderately malnourished. Heavy fighting erupted again in South Sudan's capital, Juba, on Monday. The country has spent much of its independence embroiled in a civil war driven by political differences that turned to bloodshed late in 2013. A peace deal was signed in August 2015, but experts say failure to swiftly implement its key elements have allowed tension to continue even as the country turned 5 years old on July 9th. Over 2 million people have had to flee their homes since then, 678,000 of them across borders as refugees, and 1.69 million displaced inside the country. Relief agencies say hunger is a key factor pushing South Sudanese families to flee, some heading north to South Sudan and others south to Kenya. Linor Mudu, VOA News.
Well, the prevalence of HIV/AIDS is relatively low in West Africa compared to the rest of Africa, but treatment rates there are equally low. In Ivory Coast, about 2/3 of people living with HIV and AIDS are not on antiretroviral treatment. Emily Eob has the story from Abidjan.
Stéphane Aliadi Kwame walked this neighborhood in Abidjan every day to visit people living with HIV/AIDS.
Ils ont déjà fait le dernier test de l'enfant? C'était comment? Négatif.
Treatment with antiretroviral drugs can reduce mother-to-child transmission during pregnancy and birth. Kwame works for the local NGO Lumière Action, which runs a treatment center nearby. He says people fall out of treatment for many reasons. Some become discouraged, some become misguided by charlatans touting cures, others don't have enough money to pay for transport to the clinic, and then there's the stigma.
Just last week, a couple came to the clinic and they recognized one of the nurses, so they didn't want to come back to get their treatment. They asked me to bring it to them. They stigmatize themselves sometimes.
The clinic also offers free HIV tests. Ivory Coast made antiretroviral medications free in 2008. Since then, the percentage of people on ARVs has doubled to about 30%. But aid groups say this is still too low. Clinics frequently run out of stock.
For first-line treatment, there is no problem. But for the second line, there are always stocks out. We are people living with HIV and AIDS. We are told we have a lifelong treatment to follow. We cannot understand that today there are stockouts.
Since last year, an alert system has been implemented. When a clinic runs out of stock, it contacts RIP+, a coalition of 68 local NGOs working on HIV/AIDS. RIP+ gets in touch with the Ivorian authorities to try to get the medicine. Treatment with antiretroviral drugs can slow the virus spread in the body and delay the onset of AIDS. Antiretroviral drugs, or ARVs, in Ivory Coast are financed by initiatives like the Global Fund and PEPFAR, along with the government, but the demand remains high, and so is the cost.
We could better the situation by producing the ARVs locally, not necessarily within the country, but within the sub-region. That could lower the costs.
About 80% of ARVs used in Africa are imported from abroad, and many countries are pushing to produce locally. South Africa recently announced the creation of a state-owned company to manufacture ARVs there. Emilia from VOA News in Abidjan.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. More potential security issues for Pokemon Go players. We'll be right back.
I'm Milar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. The idea of autonomous self-driving cars may be attractive, but last month's fatal Tulsa accident highlighted safety concerns. A Nissan Serena minivan relies on a single camera in the back of the driver's rearview mirror. The car can then follow the vehicle ahead, maintaining a safe distance that the driver sets. It also recognizes lanes, so it won't swerve off. If the car it moves to another lane, it's smart enough to find the next car ahead of it and start following that one. But this minivan is different from other self-driving technology because it is designed only to help drivers. They must keep their hands on the steering wheel, and an alarm goes off if a sensor on the wheel detects no hands driving. The Pokemon Go craze has sent legions of players hiking around cities and battling pocket monsters on their smartphones. But a security flaw in the app has raised security concerns for users. Security firm Red Owl found that Pokemon Go required overly broad permission for those using a Google account as a sign-in, noting that the app, in theory, could allow Pokemon Go to read one's Gmail, send email as you, and access your Google search history. Earlier this week, Pokemon Go's creators said in a blog post that it never intended to request such sweeping data access, hasn't collected information beyond the user's ID and email address, and is working with Google to power back the authorization. A new version of the app is now available in Apple's App Store. And finally, Kobe Bryant will be keeping busy with daddy duties in retirement. The former Lakers superstar has announced on Instagram that he and his wife, Vanessa, are expecting their third child, another daughter. Bryant, also known by his self-given nickname Black Mamba, posted a picture Tuesday of onesies with Baby Mamba written on it, alongside a baby pair of his signature Nike shoes. In the caption, he writes, "Beyond blessed and excited to share that we are expecting our third baby girl." Bryant's other daughters, Natalie and Gianna, are 13 and 10, respectively. The five-time NBA champion retired in April after 19 seasons in Los Angeles, and that is what is trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC and in the mornings. Today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
There have been many stories on climate change and the effect it might have on our planet. You might have heard this word in one of those stories.
Irreversible.
Rising temperatures will bring more extreme weather, food and water shortages, and irreversible changes to ecosystems that result in coral death, forest loss, and species extinction.
Irreversible means that something that has changed cannot be corrected. Our story talks about the harmful effects climate change, also known as global warming, might have in our world.
If there is irreversible damage to the environment, it cannot be fixed.
Now, when you hear the word irreversible, you will know what this newsword means.